British military intelligence sources say Russian forces are now deliberately targeting areas populated by civilians, a response to the Ukrainian resistance, which is slowing Russia's advance. In spite of these increasingly brutal tactics, volunteers, including many from outside Ukraine, are signing up to join Ukraine's army. Men between the ages of 18 and 60 have to stay in the country, so they're available for conscription.
These men are determined to fight for their country, even in the face of Russian firepower and without support from NATO. Here in Kyiv, they're waiting to sign up for the Ukrainian armed forces, resolved to do their part for the war effort. It's my duty. I want to be useful. I want to help. I want to protect. I want to fight back. I want my family to return to Ukraine as soon as possible, and I will do my best. Other volunteers are stocking up for the battle ahead and optimistic about victory.
We know why we defend our country, and our guys that are actually standing there and fighting Russian military forces, they know what they are doing. Those guys, they don't. We know what we are doing, and that's why we will win.
It's that determination that's helped inspire volunteers from much further afield to join the fight.
Ukrainian military, Zelensky, everything's been inspiring. Even like the countries surrounding, everybody's just like, it's like galvanised everybody. I've got no illusions, I've got no romantic ideas of war or like I'm going to be some hero or make a difference or any of this, but it's what I do.
I mean, you could die here.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Get wounded, which would be worse.
With heavy fighting already reaching the city of Irpin, just outside Kyiv, it looks likely the volunteers' bravery will soon be put to the test.
And despite all those volunteers, the Ukrainian military remains outnumbered. But more and more reports show that Russia's invasion has slowed or even stopped in recent days. Russian soldiers have moved into Ukraine's northeast and south, although it's not clear how much territory they actually control. Columns are getting close to the capital, Kyiv, and as we heard earlier, the city of Mariupol on the Black Sea has been under siege for days. With us now from London is Ed Arnold. He's a European security expert with the Royal United Services Institute, a defence think tank. Ed, thank you for joining DW this morning. We're now a week and a half into the war in Ukraine. Militarily, how is Russia doing?
So yes, we're on day 11 thus far, and the Russian military have performed very poorly, and I think it's a very poor plan executed also poorly. Their movement is very constrained. It's been very slow. In some ways, it's been very complex. And as you've just highlighted in your piece, the logistics problems of supplying frontline troops is hampering efforts across the country to continue their advance. The invasion started on the northeast and south, and we're seeing a lot better performance to the south, but in the northeast and north stalled. And actually, in some places, the Ukrainian forces are putting in quite small scale at the moment, very sophisticated counterattacks, which is causing Russian advancement serious problems.
How are the Ukrainians doing it? I mean, as we've just said, they're outnumbered. Are its soldiers, they're still holding their own? How are they doing that?
Yes, I mean, this is a case of the Russians performing very poorly, but the Ukrainians performing exemplary, and that's both the Ukrainian professional military, but also civil society. The Ukrainians' will to fight has proved decisive in the initial phases over the weekend up until around Monday, and then as we've moved into phase 2, they are adapting. The air force is still intact but depleted, and like I said, they've put a quite remarkable counterattack in around Kyiv and also to the west of Kyiv, which is meaning that the Russian encirclement of Kyiv is taking a lot longer in terms of the time, and actually ground forces are starting to target the convoy to the north of Kyiv because it's static and very vulnerable.
Now, there's been so much conjecture about a no-fly zone, impassioned pleas for and against. If we say agree with those saying no to the no-fly zone, that it will only lead to escalation, then what else should the West be doing to support Ukraine right now?
Yes, that's right. And I think it's important to note that there are a variety of technical measures. You know, a no-fly zone is not just a blanket no-fly zone. There's a grade in between. But essentially what it would mean at this moment in time is the active suppression of air defense assets, both in Belarus and Russia, and actually, you know, hunting and destroying Russian aircraft within that area, which the risks of escalation are very high. Just this week, we've seen, unfortunately, a Romanian MiG-21 go down in the Black Sea due to mechanical issues, not actually due to enemy fire, and also the search and rescue helicopter that went to retrieve the pilot also went down due to bad weather. So it's a case where it's illustrative of how these things can actually be misinterpreted on the ground in the fog of war. So everyone is worried about escalation. At the moment, NATO and other Western countries are continuing the supply of lethal aid, continuing intelligence sharing, and possibly even supporting Ukrainian targeting and intelligence and decision support on the ground, which is not inconsiderable support that NATO nations are providing.
Now, Ukraine says it's killed more than 11,000 soldiers. Now, that's obviously a number that is impossible to verify at this stage. Russia only admitting to losing several hundred. What could that mean?
Yes, I mean, it's very difficult to provide accurate numbers, and the Russians have only put out an official figure in the last couple of days, which does seem very low. But still, in terms of only 11 days into our operation, are actually quite high. I mean, if we take roughly the middle number of the Russian report to the Ukrainian report, that's around 5,000. I mean, for context, that is more than the Americans lost in the combat operations in Iraq, and that's only in 11 days as opposed to 7 years. So it is considerable. The other thing with the Russians' military is the Pentagon now assessed that 95% of their combat power that was amassed around Ukraine for this operation has now been committed to the country. So they don't have a reserve, which should really run at about 30%. It's actually now at 5%. So very quickly, I think the Russian plan of a whole of country strategy is unraveling, and they just might not have the numbers to achieve the military objectives that they might have set themselves.
Ed Arnold from Britain's Royal United Services Institute, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
And let's take a look now at some other developments in the conflict. Credit card giants MasterCard and Visa say they're suspending operations in Russia, dealing the latest blow to the increasingly isolated country's embattled financial system. The move follows crushing economic sanctions imposed by the West in response to President Putin's war on Ukraine. Russia's largest airline, state-owned Aeroflot, says it will halt all international flights except to Belarus from the 8th of March. This comes after Russia's aviation agency warned that Russian planes leased from foreign companies could be impounded under international sanctions. 33 countries have already banned Russian aircraft from their airspace. Several Western media organisations say they're suspending reporting in Russia, with many journalists leaving the country. The decision comes after the Kremlin passed legislation cracking down on independent reporting. Under the new law, journalists can face up to 15 years in prison for describing Putin's attack on Ukraine as an invasion or war.